take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
Hey everybody, welcome, Life in Red. We're back and I'm very pleased to be joined by my guest today. My good, long-lost friend. I haven't seen you, well, I saw you recently, but other than that, it was like a 2-year gap.
It's
Danielle Allard, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm
Ryan?
good. I'm very good, thank you. I'm
good.
glad we're going to be able to catch up on a microphone.
Me too.
Because I think you got a lot of cool stuff going on and lots of fun stuff to talk about.
I feel the same way about you.
Oh. You are. I'll let you describe it. Just like I said, you. What are you? Who are you?
Philosophical. Who am I?
What is life?
I'll answer with the easy version. I'm a singer-songwriter here in Ottawa, Canada. I teach by day. That's the thing that I do by day, and by night I make music, and it's really fun.
Yeah, how hard is that to juggle? One of the hardest things when people ask me about, doing a podcast or anything, and that this is a hobby. You're doing it. You're making money. You're putting out records and albums. The hardest thing I find is juggling the two, because a full-time life is it's pretty taxing. You go there all day. You're mentally drained by the end of it, and then you got to go do something else. How do you find that balance?
Oh, balance. Ha ha ha. Funny. I think it was a few years ago that I just kind of kept putting myself through this vicious cycle of taking on too much and then getting extremely ill because of it. And so more recently I've learned to balance those things. So I'd say it's not as hard as it used to be, but you're also catching me at the end of a day in which I was teaching until 7 p.m. last night. I had a show and got home at 1 a.m, and then I was teaching again today at 8 a.m. So today I don't feel like I'm balancing really well, but it's also just over time, it's really thinking what drains me of my energy and what gives me energy, and how am I going to schedule my life so that I'm not constantly draining myself and learning to say no, which is really hard for most of us, I think.
I'm terrible. I'm just always yeah, no problem. And then all of a sudden you're just I'm drowning.
Yes. Yeah. And so what I did is I spoke to so many people about this, learning how to say no. And so my piece of advice for you and to anybody who's listening about juggling many things and learning to say no, it's using it as an opportunity to help somebody. So for me, when I'm saying no now, it used to always be from this place of, I don't want to say no because they need my help. But now when I say no to something like another show, then I can immediately refer a friend who can do that thing instead. So not only am I helping the organizer, but I'm helping another friend get a gig. So that might help you if you have to say no.
Wow. Spitting off wisdom, and we're not even 3 minutes in. You have 3 albums out now. Yes. The last one more recently, a year ago, you said?
Yes, it was last May.
Where do you find that passion, that that spark to create an album? I don't want to go, working in radio, I hear people interview artists and you're like, what inspires you, but how do you, when you're going out and you're I'm going to create an album, what goes into that? How do you piece together the songs? I guess it's probably very much, up to the individual, and everyone has a different style, but how do you go about it?
Yeah, when you're asking what goes into that, my initial response was just to be mostly despair.
To me, that makes a great album.
It really does.
I must say.
And so for me, that was a powerful motivator for a long time, is just super sad teenage girl songs. And that's still something that I just feel compelled to write. It's a way of getting out all those bad feelings. It's just putting them down on paper, and they can go live over there and not inside of me anymore. But in terms of actually sitting down and going through that whole album process, I think most times it's been by accident. You just I've always played music. I started playing when I was quite young. I started doing a lot of kind of different art projects when I was young. But as I got older and I went through university, I kind of stopped because I was just so swamped with work, so swamped with school. And then a friend came by And we started playing shows just for fun. And then he said, well, we can make some money at this. And I thought, well, I can pay off some tuition and I can just play a few shows, and that's the way it is. But our first show, people walked up and were asking for an album. And I was just so taken aback. I was like, well, obviously I don't have one of those. But then people kept asking. It just kind of seemed to be this huge, massive public pressure for us to make that album. And we ended up doing it, which is not something that I thought I would do in my life necessarily, is write and produce an entire album. So I think getting through that hurdle the first time, knowing the process after, made it easier for me to do it again and again. And people walk up at CD release parties now and are like, so when's the next album? And I'm like, dude,
Come on.
Can you just enjoy this one?
Oh,
like,
funny.
it was so much work and so much money.
That's it's a big thing too, that I guess people, because I mean, you put it out independently, right?
Yes.
So that's self-financed.
Oh, for sure.
I remember having Amanda on, and she was an author, and it's the same thing. She's like, yeah, you got to put your own money into it.
For sure.
If you're not published, and it's like, to me, it's like, wow, like you must really want to do this. You know what I mean? Like, you can really tell the dedication is there, that you're going to put an album self-financed, which
For
can't,
sure.
because I don't know what like putting out a CD is.
Yeah. Well, my last
Do
couple...
people still do? Like, or do you just
for sure.
just put direct stream?
Oh, for sure. CDs. I actually just had a conversation with somebody about this today, just debating between the CD and the physical purchase versus the digital. And I mean, you still just see so much more of a return on investment with something physical than we do with any kind of streams or downloads.
Way back when the rock station I worked for folded, we got all the CDs, and I loved it. I was like, oh my god, look at it! The Hue Music Library was like self-picking. And I had them in my car and would listen to them all the time. And then I got a new car, and new cars now do not have CD players.
No, don't tell me that.
Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, I'm so sorry.
You think I drive a new car?
I guess, yeah. I'm working 2 jobs. Come on. But the biggest thing was, it was 2017 car, and it doesn't have a CD player.
Wow.
So now I have all these CDs.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, who really goes out and buys a stereo anymore? You go and buy Bluetooth. And
You're just going to have to get those monster speakers and those really expensive, gigantic cables and just become an audiophile and just get a 5-disc CD changer, Ryan.
Yeah, well, I suppose you could
room.
put them on. But that's what I'm wondering, like, if, you still make the CDs. But that has to be a financial investment in itself to get the artwork, put it together, like, make the CD. I don't even know what goes into, like, burning things to a CD and then mass printing them.
Yeah,
like,
it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I've still, the CD from 2015 I'm almost out of, and that was a 1,000 print. So people buy them, and people at live shows especially.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a way for them to connect with you after a show. It's a couple bucks for them, so it's not anything crazy. You're still making a couple bucks back per unit, but people still like CDs, but I'm sad to hear that new cars don't have CDs.
We're gonna
have to
rethink
rethink that.
the financial model, the next one. I guess I had a great question. I already forgot what it was going to be. What is that feeling like? So you made 1,000 CDs. Who knows what's going to happen? Like, people ask for them, but you're almost out of them.
Yes.
What is that feeling like? And I've always wanted to ask a question like this. When 1,000 people buy your work to listen to you, what goes through your mind when you're thinking, like, wow, like 1,000 people are like listening to me and paid their hard-earned dollars to listen to you?
I guess I didn't really think about it until just now, Ryan, when you asked me that question.
We have profound talks here.
No, when you actually think about it for a moment, you're like, wow, that's a thing that I did. I think the more profound moments are the people that write after they've listened to it. So there's one track specifically off of that. It's called Shipwreck, and it's just like gut-wrenching. And when you're recording, there's always one track in the album when you're listening to it, when somebody lays down an instrument or something. And the first time I heard it, I just burst into tears, and I was just so pleased with how it actually came across. And it's just a devastating song. But so many people have written to me just to say that specific song helped me through so much. And then you're like, okay, good. My sad teenage girl music didn't depress you further, but it actually helped you by just feeling like you weren't alone in that moment. Like somebody had experienced that exact same thing, and that listening to that music was some kind of catharsis. So I think it's those little moments along the way when people write and say, this music had a profound impact on me or got me through something. That's something that also makes you keep creating, because you're like, oh, okay, I can make a difference and I can help.
Right.
Yeah.
I assume it's the same for you, but I often say, so like when I'm speaking about mental health or anything like that, when I was a teenager, I will credit music to, saving my life. It's one of those things that spoke to me when you're going through those teenage years where you feel like the world's on fire and you don't know what's going on. That you hear like whether it's your favorite band or just a song on the radio that you're just like, it's like you wrote that yourself, but someone like came to you. Do you have that in mind when you write a song, or is it all just like, this is me, this is what I'm feeling? Like, do you go out with the thought that other people might relate to this, or are you kind of like 16-year-old Ryan where you're just like, it's me against the world and there's nobody else?
I think a lot of the stuff that I write, that gets right into talking about the writing practice. And I think I've journaled for so long. So it's not like songs are usually just written on the spot about this one thing. So I'll go through, I'll have a musical idea, and then I'll kind of pick through a series of things that have been written, sometimes over months, sometimes over years, that kind of work well together and put it all together. So I don't even think it's just that kind of one thing, this is me. Sometimes it's also just like hearing people's stories and hearing people's experiences and building stuff off of those things too. There's one song called Echo, and it was just kind of hearing that same thing over and over and over from so many different people and putting all of that together. So I think it's always kind of this communal thing when I'm writing, more so than just teenage Ryan.
He's dramatic. When you say that the sad girl music, like that's me to a T. I like the sad girl music, but then I turned to metal and I was like, yeah, now we're angry.
Balance it out,
yeah. You took those years off in university to balance. Was there ever a goal before that? Like you're like, I am talented. I think I can make a go at this. Or was it just, this is just something you're doing for fun? And we're talking before the university part.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever think you could make a go of it? Like, it was something you ever really wanted to do? Or did after it just kind of fell on your lap?
So I had a pretty rough time in elementary school. I didn't really fit in. I was a mega nerd. That's, I guess, the only way that I could describe it. Super nerdy. And most of my friends were my teachers. And so for me, I kind of threw myself into extra homework for fun. I don't know why that was fun at 7 years old. And all of the arts. So I was doing theater and dance and literary arts and visual arts and music, and just doing whatever I could. Mostly because of raging anxiety. That's probably when I think back to childhood, like not being able to just sit still and do nothing. Like I have to be doing something. And I had one principal who just really believed in me and thought that there was some talent there, which was nice from him, I thought, and told me about an art school. So I actually went to high school for arts, I think with the intention of maybe doing that one day professionally. I applied for the music program and I got into vocal performance. And I mean, we were performing like 75 shows a year from grade 9 to grade 12.
Wow.
And training like 6 hours a day. So I guess I was pretty hardcore then, but I was so grateful in that grade 11 we were sat down to do business planning. And so you have to actually plan out a tour, budget everything, and then see how much money you have left over at the end. And for me at 16 years old, I was like, wow, this is a realization. I might live in a cardboard box. That might be my life path if I just do this thing. So university for me was something that was important because I didn't think that music full-time was an option. And I was like, well, I guess I can go take something like media production or communication, and at least I could still apply that to music if I want to, but at least I could get a job somewhere with that. And I just ended up really loving both. So I just kind of still do both all the time.
Do you ever like sing your lesson plan or something?
Which is hilarious because
Incorporate?
I've been told that I have to go perform in class on Friday. So
Oh, great.
that's probably actually going to happen.
Oh, fun.
Lesson plan gets sung.
One of the things, sometimes I like to define myself as like a music geek, or sometimes I can be a little bit pretentious with it, especially when it comes to new music. Mm-hmm. Does it ever bother, maybe not you specifically, but when you're talking to other musicians or, you know, other people in that scene, that when you hear some of the new popular songs that come on, you know, they're streaming high or they're on the radio, and it's just kind of like the whole song is just slap that booty or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's nothing to it, but yet it's popular. Like, it's all over the place. It's making tons of money.
Yeah.
And then you have people who literally are so talented and they work so hard.
Yes.
And I don't want to discredit the people putting out that music as if they're not talented or hardworking. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just, does it ever come up in conversation? Does it ever bother anybody or musicians that sometimes it just, like, you pour your heart and soul into something and you think it's meaningful.
Yes.
And then the popular thing is about slapping booty or getting
Yes.
drinks at the club.
I
Is it
know.
ever,
I know.
to me, it's deflating. I don't know about, you know, for talented people trying to make it.
Well, I think for a lot of people, that's kind of frustrating, but it's also the reason why that's so popular is the simplicity of it. And it's something that's more accessible to people. People make fun of pop music because it's 4 chords over and over and over again, but that's just so accessible to people. And I find, I mean, you can talk about academia as well. It's just like this huge divide between these professional musicians who have studied their whole lives and then the general public. So they're just, you'd have to bridge that gap anyways. So that's why those really simple hooks always work. But then you think back to things like the Beatles, and it's like it can still be simple and it can still be meaningful.
Yeah.
And I wish, and I'm going to sound like such an old woman, but I'm getting there because I've just been spending more time with the children in my life, and I teach social media, so it's like the combination of social media and this kind of music and interacting with children. You just find yourself, you're like, when a 6-year-old looks at you and asks you what this song is about, and it's exactly everything you just described, you're like,
Yeah, he must have been 6 or 7 at the time. But my little brother singing "Wiggle Wiggle Wiggle," like Jason, I think it was Jason Derulo a couple years ago, and he just said it. I'm like, don't you sing that song?
I know.
No.
And you find yourself, you're like, I got really old on the inside.
Yeah.
You're like, that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Don't. So I just wish there was more balance in that regard. And
Yeah.
I got into media and communication because of just understanding how important that is for all of society, and how it is to raise a society with access to this amount of information and the quality of information that kids now have access to.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest things is that, you know, my 3-year-old sister can navigate YouTube probably better than I can.
Yes.
And I'm just like, how you can't even ask for milk properly, but yet you're on YouTube like just going about, and it's like that's worrisome.
For sure. And I think that this understanding that or this definition that they're digital natives, that's what children are now. They're digital natives. It's like, no, you aren't just born with an inclination towards that. Like, there still needs to be so much education around it. And I just don't think we're there yet. Like, technology has just gone, and we're just trying to keep up with
Well, that's
technology.
it moves. It moves so fast, and like the government can't keep up. Like, you know, our regulatory bodies are just like starting to navigate regulating high-speed internet. Like, we've had that for 25 years, right? And like by the time we finally catch up, one of the best analogies I ever heard too is, you know, information, especially with the internet and stuff. There's like, it's like a diet. Like, you have good information like for your diet, and you have bad information for your diet. And unfortunately, bad information, you go into fake news, you go into, you know, clickbait headlines, all that stuff. Like, that's the stuff that wins. And
yes. And you also just think about like how somebody understands the way the world works around them. Because I mean, even through this podcast, like, I could look like a really accomplished, successful person. You go online and it's just like post after post of things are awesome.
Yeah.
And the way that we curate our online lives is not at all the way our lives are. But then you think about the 3-year-old on YouTube, that this is the way everybody's lives are. Why isn't my life like that? It's just leading to so many crazy problems.
Yeah, I remember listening. Do you know who Jonathan? Oh, I'm gonna say his name wrong. Hyde. Anyway, he was on a podcast I was listening to, and he's published a book about this. I should have looked it up, but this is what happens when you're just talking and off the top of your head. But I was talking about that and the link between the correlation. It's not an established link, but the rise in depression and anxiety and suicide, especially with young women, or young girls, I should say, that like 12, 13, and they're experiencing that much earlier than, hormones or all that stuff would dictate. And it's, how are we supposed, like, when a child at 3 could navigate YouTube faster than an adult, how is an adult supposed to be able to monitor it or anything like that without totally taking it away?
It's a debate for the ages.
Right? Yeah. Jeez. Anyway, songwriting.
It's like, sorry, I just took us way down that. It's been on my mind recently, in case you couldn't tell.
It's all around. It's all around us. How can it not?
Yes.
I went through, kind of, I don't know what it was. It was a very anxious, overwhelming time where the political and cultural discourse, especially on Twitter, like, consumed me and consumed my life, that it was like I was taking it off of Twitter and like impacting it and like putting it into my real life. Like all the stuff you're talking about, like left versus right, and there was the Me Too movement and white equals racist. Like all this stuff was just like, it was coming at me, and I was just like taking it so seriously. And my girlfriend looks at me one day and she's like, this is like really bothering you, right? And I was like, it just kind of like all of a sudden, like everything just, and I snapped out of it. I was like, oh my God, yeah, why?
Yeah. And no, and it's so funny because I do teach social media, and then when I'm in class, I'm like, manage and create good content and make the world a better place. That's your goal. Try to not spend a lot of time there, which is just this thing. It's just like, be on social media, but also don't.
And then like, as me trying to market a podcast, or you trying to market, your next gig or your next album, pretty much the only avenue at this point that we really have is social media.
Yes.
I mean, you can go to the shows, you can put up posts. There's still some traditional ways, of course, networking. Everyone uses social media to try to market themselves or brand a product.
Absolutely.
And so now you're at this balance, and I don't know if you experience it. I sure do, of like, I don't want to be on it, but here I am. You have to manage the algorithm and try to be seen and go in these engagement groups and comment and like. And I'm just like, can people listen to my podcast, please? You know what I mean? Like,
oh, I know.
It's
tough. The biggest thing that I did for my own mental health was, 1, deleting Facebook Messenger from my phone. And just resolving to check it from a desktop. And that is something that Facebook just makes it so difficult to mute notifications. Because the other thing that I did is mute all notifications. So that your phone's not blowing up all the time, because we don't understand the mental stress that puts on us. Is every time I open my phone, there's 75 things I need to check. And then all of these platforms like Facebook are trying to get people on more regularly. So it's just like notifications like 37 people want to hang out with you. You should contact them. I'm like, no, Facebook.
Yeah, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah.
Or
like,
your friend just posted.
Push notification.
Like, I'm like, get out of here. I don't know if you can talk about it a bit, but like, what do you kind of... I'm not even that old. I'm 27. But what are you seeing with like 18, 19-year-olds now? Like, it must... Is there like have you seen a change over the years of teaching or anything when it comes to social media and maybe mental health or anxiety or anything like that? Like, are things changing in that aspect?
Well, I think it's nice that we're talking about it, and then my students are feeling more confident in actually walking up and expressing these things and seeking the help that they need on campus. We have excellent resources on campus for them. But when it comes to social media, what you see is that because they're on it younger and younger, I mean, their decision-making power isn't there at 12 years old to make decisions for their careers. So the kind of content that they're posting and that they're rediscovering as they're becoming adults, because they forgot that they started a Twitter account when they were 12 and then sent out 2,000 tweets of God knows what.
Yeah.
So they come to this class, and mostly we spend so much time in class just trying desperately to delete content of things that they can't even believe that they would put on the internet. And then you're sitting there trying to get a job later on. Even I think about just like I don't understand how your entire childhood can be available on the internet. Like everything from the day you're born, constant photos of everything that's there. People should have a say in what kind of content exists of them when it comes to the internet. And then they're 25 trying to get a job, and then when you Google their name, like it's all their baby pictures and their Twitter account from when they were 12.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that, because like when I was coming into it, I was at least like I think 15 when Facebook came. So like I had to go delete a lot of stuff, but not like that bad.
Yeah.
And then you see kind of, you know, especially in politics right now, that people go looking. Like they will dig through every piece of thing you've ever posted, looking for that one, that one thing, just to take you out.
Absolutely.
And that's stressful. I'm like, oh shit, what did I definitely tweeted some dumb stuff.
Yeah.
Like, but do I have to scroll through all of it?
We can talk about it after. I can give you some tips and some tools
Yeah,
for deleting many tweets.
Yeah, we will. We definitely will. 2012 Ryan was not smart. He was definitely angsty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know where it's gonna go. And one of the biggest concerns I have is how much they control now of our discourse and our conversation, and
for sure, and what information we have access to and when.
Those algorithms, I don't think people realize, are real sketchy.
Hugely powerful. It's a lot of control. If you control the media, you control a whole lot. And what I'm seeing with students as well is a lot of them are being open about debt problems and money problems. And that's not only just because of the economic state for young people, but it's also this constant pressure to keep up, and the fact that we have the ability to target advertisements specifically to you based on all of your emails and everything that you've ever liked online. I mean, it gets really crazy what advertisers have access to. And then if you got all these targeted emails specifically to you based on your interests that are just in this device that's constantly in your hands, and your brain is still forming until the age of 25, like, we're going to make some choices.
We're going to invest in that 36% interest rate $5,000 loan and spend years trying to pay it off.
Yes.
Guilty. It's I don't know where it goes, because there's such a battle, and like I said, we're so slow on reacting that like most of the people in charge of making the decisions are like, what's the Instagram Snapchat thing again? And you're like, no, Aunt Diane, they're different. And they're supposed to regulate and keep us safe, and you know, is it you know, free speech, and is it, where does that fall? Does it need to be regulated? Is it a business? Is it up to us? Like, it's all these questions.
Every content creator I talk to, it's just like, go make good content that makes the world a better place. Because if that's all that was on social media, it would probably be a different conversation. But if we were more mindful about the content that we're creating, like you're doing this podcast and you're spreading so many different voices about issues that people need to actually talk about. You're not just trying to sell me brand name sneakers, because that will apparently make me look better and feel better. Though it doesn't matter how much money I spend on those sneakers, that is not the problem. It was not the shoes that I had on my feet.
Well, going back to your point, like the reason I kind of started this is not only for, you know, my mental health and just meeting new people, but there's just, to me, like, the world today is just starving of authenticity from, you know, like, politics aren't real, like traditional media is not real. You know, and there's so many interesting people. And even with this podcast, I can't even get to all the real things that people might want to say or talk about, because you have to be guarded. You have to, okay, what is, like, I can't say this because I might get in trouble with my job. I might, you know, say something and get sued. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't even get to the real meat and potatoes of some things that people want to say. There's a ton of things I want to say that I have to be smart about. But just, there are some people, but a lot of people just aren't real on social media. And it bugs me. And I was like, why can't I, you know, when you get into the influencers and stuff and you're just like, they're all the same with their aesthetic and their wisdom, and you're just kind of like you just like everyone's just doing the same thing, and we're just like, I think when influencers started, these people took off because they said good stuff, and now it's just like everyone wants to be an influencer at some point, and it's just like, man, what a drag. Like, there's just, now I don't even want to follow you because all you're doing is giveaways and talking about businesses and brands and your clients, which I get it, you're making your money, good for you, but
I think about all the good things that could be said and all the ways the world could be made a better place if influencers were influencing for a different reason.
Right. Yeah. I respect them when they, you know, if they're doing a product that they use themselves or something like that. And I don't know. It just depresses me, man.
We're getting to that point in the podcast. We should change the subject then, Ryan. Talking about influencers.
I mean, we connected again and set this up. We met at a speaking engagement. Yes. We rendezvoused. We connected.
I like that so much.
And you know, I talk about my story and just going through it. And you were talking about creativity and mental health. Yeah, you know, I know the speech is on YouTube, so I'll definitely like to tweet that out and stuff so they get the full picture. But
thank you.
What was the, you know, what were you trying to say? What were you going about when you went about that speech?
Yeah, so when I was asked to do it, it's because I run a series called Art Night, actually. So when Michael invited me to speak, it was mostly because that series has been running now for 6 years, which is super fun. And it's running twice a month. So we meet at Stella Luna Gelato. And
gelato.
We eat gelato,
Hell yeah.
Which is step one towards good mental health is gelato. And at first, it was just performances. So it was just kind of a cafe that I was booking other singer-songwriters to join me. And it just ended up being like this really nice cafe vibe where everybody was just kind of coming on a Sunday night and de-stressing and unwinding. But it was even before I booked that show, I just noticed that I was really young and I found music and I found this amazing creative outlet. But then I went to high school. I still had that. But all of my friends that went into different high schools and went into different areas, they didn't have that anymore. And so they seemed to be having a little bit more of a struggle than I did at that time. And then as we became adults, it got even worse because then you have all of these pressures on you all the time. You got the issues of trying to fit in, trying to get a job, trying to get 5 jobs, trying to keep said jobs. And there's no stress relief in sight. And people are sometimes thinking, okay, well, I just need to unwind and I'm just going to watch Netflix. Or I'm going to unwind, so I'm going to scroll through my social media feed. But for me, that was never powerful enough to calm my anxiety. Like, I needed to be doing something, as simple as doing something could be. And for me, for a long time, that was music. And especially when I wasn't doing it professionally. It was great that I could just go and physically interact with an instrument. And that physicality, like, we all need something kinesthetic in our lives. And exercise is great, but creating something and the end result of actually making something, as ugly as it does not have to be anything beautiful, but just that you did that thing. It's a very different feeling from exercise. So I had this, and I just noticed that so many people in my life didn't. And so I had a couple of nights at my apartment at the time where I just invited people over. It's like 5 or 6 of us. And I said, okay, here's some canvases. Here's some Dollarama paint, and this is our activity for the night. And at first people giggled, but then people really liked it. And everybody was asking, when's the next one? When's the next one? I took on a weekly show at a bar, and I was like, let's test this theory, shall we? So I showed up at the bar. It's a Monday night at 9 p.m., and I've got a bunch of crayons and construction paper with me at the bar. And I'm starting to play some music, and there's just crayons and construction paper hanging around. And at first, people walked in and laughed and made fun of the art supplies on the table. Like, what is this? This is a bar. Ha ha ha. 3 beers later, those guys were all over the art supplies. They were all over the crayons. Every single person there was doing some kind of art, as terrible as it was. It did not have to be beautiful, but everybody was smiling in a way that they weren't actually when they walked into that place. So just seeing that very, very easy introduction to art again, because what happens is everybody thinks that art is for 2 people or 2 groups of people. Art is for children or it is for professionals. And what makes me laugh about that is because it's absolutely not for professionals. And for me as a musician, for anybody to say music's only for you because you are a professional, I do it so regularly that it's not necessarily the best form of stress relief for me.
Right.
Because it gets to a point where you're just like, I hold myself to a certain standard. If I'm spending time doing this, then it should be towards business goals, blah, 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 blah. So when I'm actually stressed, I'm not playing music anymore. I am painting chubby animals. That's my thing. Chubby animals. Yeah, they're just all super cute and very chubby, and I paint them. And it's terrible. And nobody would ever give me money for that art. But it's just something that at the end of a 1-hour period, I completely cleared my head because the only thing I had to worry about was like painting in this pug's legs. Like that's all I had to do for that hour. And it's okay for me to schedule that time in because we need that release. We need that opportunity. I shouldn't feel guilty the whole time that I'm painting the pug's legs because I'm not doing work. It's like I can schedule that in and I can be okay with that. And at the end, I created something. I did something physical and I got myself out of my head. So just doing that for so long, bringing crayons into bars and into the classroom. I mean, I still have stickers in class, and I definitely have taught people up to the age of 68, and they're all down to win some stickers in class. Like, there's that kid in all of us, and we should give ourselves and give other people permission to engage with that child inside of us more often.
Yeah, there's that mindset, especially today, and when we talk about social media, is that grind. It's like, I need to be 24 hours a day doing this, doing that, doing this. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, and this is a paraphrase because I can't remember exactly, but it's like, once you see the way, you see it in all things. And what I take from that, and what I bring that up with what you were saying, is when you're saying I don't have to feel guilty because I'm doing this. When I apply that quote to it, it's you're understanding that by taking this hour, that it is going to make, all these other things better, whether it's your writing, your music, your teaching, your performing, whatever that is, because you took that hour. Yes. And you're still working your brain, you're still doing something, you're not being a slob, but it's helping you create and develop in those certain ways. And who knows, maybe when you're drawing, you pick up, you're like, think of a song lyric, that'd be great. And absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, it just, that stuff is all part of the process too. Yeah. And that's kind of, I love, like, and I'm a advocate for that as well. Okay. So you're going to go paint some chubby animals? I do stick figures.
Chubby stick figures.
To me, like, that's what this podcast is in a way. I don't know if a podcast is art.
It is.
But it's the same process for me that I'm creating, and now I'm sitting, with you or with this other guest, and I'm engaged in a conversation, and I'm not thinking of anything else outside of it right now. I'm listening to what you're saying. And then, I'm picking up things, and you see me, I'm writing things down and all that stuff. It's just like, to me, that's where I'm trying to expand my brain so everything else that I do is better. Yes. And I don't know.
Maybe much as it. Everybody, you're talking about kind of this burnout culture that we've created. So even people are like, you're doing stuff all the time. And social media also gives that illusion that you are constantly doing things. When sometimes I'm posting because I was doing an event and there was no time. It doesn't mean that I'm currently doing that, but the world's perception is you're also doing that now. And then you're doing this other thing. But exist and we can't be efficient when we're constantly in a state of burnout. And it took me just a few years of learning that, because I was working 3 or 4 jobs doing university. And I would say it was probably only by like year 6 when I was finishing grad school that I was like, I can't do this to myself for the rest of my life. So I need to give myself permission. If I'm feeling like I'm going insane or if I'm heading towards burnout, I need to give myself permission to have those moments of relaxation. So even if I'm working with students, I was like, you should never be looking at a blank page for 8 hours and just wondering what to write. Like, that's not a good use of your time. You're stressed out the whole time. You need to go and do something else, preferably something physical, because that's going to get you out of your head, because all you're doing is second guessing yourself if you're staring at that blank page forever. You shouldn't be spending your time that way. There's way better ways of spending your life.
And yet I think everyone, especially students, that's what like we do. Like that, the writing the essay the night before it's due.
Yep.
And I just don't know. Anyway, that's a conversation all on its own. If that's the right way we need to be bringing people up into the world. But how does it make you feel then that the arts always seem to be the first to go when we're talking about like budget cuts, when we're talking about people who talk about the economy, the this, the that, like there's a lot of people who put art at the bottom of the list.
Yep.
Whether that's music, that's drawing, that's creating, all that stuff.
Yes.
It's always at the bottom.
And it absolutely shouldn't be. Like,
No,
it's
always the first to go.
It's always cut first. In organizations, when there's an economic problem, the communications department is always the first to be cut. There's just this lack of value for good communicators. And I think arts helps you to develop so much empathy. And it's just like, it's a huge, huge coping mechanism. So that's why it's like, I don't care if people think it's for professionals. It's absolutely not. Every single person should have some kind of creative outlet in addition to some of the other things that they use to cope day to day. But it's such a shame that arts funding is constantly cut. In fact, on Saturday, it's my high school's 50th reunion party or anniversary party, and it's a fundraiser for the school. So I will be there from 7 in the morning until midnight volunteering to raise money for the arts program for the high school, because a lot of the funding for that program just comes from students and parents and members of the community raising money to keep it alive. And I really believe in that program. So it's sad to see the funding constantly cut.
Yeah. I don't get it. And I don't know how you can convince, politicians and people high up when they're only concerned about money, about it. Kind of like goes to the I guess in a way, the theory of, keeping when you're talking about business, like a happy employee.
Yeah.
That everyone always kind of thinks of the bottom line and dollar value, when if you have a happy employee, or using the art example, when you give people these outlets to create and to express emotion and express all the things in their head, their anxieties, their ups and their downs, and whatever the outlet is, that allows room to grow almost exponentially in all these areas, which will in turn will bring you the money.
Yes.
And I just, like, where is that disconnect? And I just, as a young person, like, just still relatively new in the career field, like, I look at all these things, I'm like, how is that answer not clear to you? Or is it just my opinion and it's not the answer? I don't know.
No, it's not your opinion. And if you want to help, I'm going to do a plug right now. In 5 minutes, just 5 minutes of your time, anybody who's listening in all of Ottawa who has actually purchased any kind of music thing or gone to a show at all and spent money at a show this year, there is currently on the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition website.
What's that website?
It's, I believe, omic.ca. But just Google Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. And they're running a survey, because what is happening right now is we're trying to convince everybody that music is a huge economic driver. And so we're trying to make Ottawa a music city. So I sit on the board of OMIC, and the next step is really gathering all this information. We're hoping to have responses from over 1,000 people, of just people who have gone to shows, all the musicians in town, all of the music businesses in town, so we can get that kind of economic scope of how much money is spent. If that's going to be the one factor for all of these people to provide funding, if you want to see the economic benefits of arts, and they're huge, like when you think about a festival like Blues Fest.
Oh, for sure.
They're huge, the benefits of supporting the arts, not only just for all of the reasons we've already talked about, but for that economic purpose. So you can help us if you just fill out that survey. It takes 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get that out on the social media.
On the social media.
When I'm balancing my time on it. I mean, it's just, is Ottawa a music town? And I know I have people outside of Ottawa, and you know it a lot better than I do, because you're more on the grassroots level, and you see people who just, those are the people who truly love music. But when I look at things, major acts in my line of business, they always skip Ottawa. Almost always, because we never sell out. Ever. Not even the biggest band you can think of, we don't sell out. And that one, like, where's that disconnect? Is it just they don't want to spend that much money, but they'll spend a little bit of money? I guess that's what the survey will say. But
yeah, I think that's what the survey's
that's why
there
Ottawa gets
to
that
determine.
boring, that boring reputation.
I know, and it was only a few years ago that they, in partnership with the city, unveiled the Ottawa Music Strategy. So there's actually a policy in place right now to make Ottawa a music city, because it hasn't been. But it's like, where do we find the audiences, and how do we convince them to leave their very comfortable houses? But I think that there's just so many simple ways to support everything that's happening locally, and it's like, go to one show a year. Go to one show. That makes a big difference. If you want to actually see Ottawa talent get to a point where it's on the radio and you're like, oh, wow, they're from Ottawa and I knew them, book a living room show. It's so easy, and people don't realize you can contact any local musician and just say, hey, do you want to come play my house party? I'm having 20 people in my living room, and I'd like you to just show up and play a couple of sets. We're having a potluck, and people are going to put money in a hat. And every musician is going to be like, yes, I will be at your house.
I didn't
just
even know
tell
that was
me
a
when.
thing.
It's totally a thing.
That's amazing.
And they're the best, because it's just like this epic room full of energy. Everybody's listening, and it just becomes this like beautiful storytelling experience. And it's something that is way more money than a local musician is going to see at most shows. So those kinds of things can immediately be taken and put into that very expensive album. But it's just like, just go out once a year to a local show, because it's just, I think what's also disheartening for local musicians is just the amount of people that just appear during Blues Fest time or during City Folk time. And it's like, but hey guys, we're here all year and we're ready to entertain you, and for only $5 usually. But we can get to a point where you're seeing us on a City Folk stage, or you're seeing us performing at Blues Fest because you've gone out that one time a year to support, or you bought that $10 CD.
Yeah, it's all cyclical, eh?
We got to find those audiences, and I think we've got to figure out how to get more funding and how to get more people's eyes on Ottawa, because I think there's a lot of talent here, and we can be considered a music city.
I mean, not to like toot your own horn there or pump your tires, but I think you did play Blues Fest and you played City Folk, haven't you?
Yes.
So
yeah,
I get big people in here now. So I wanted to point that out.
But those are usually just, even when you're just like, how did you do albums? Like, it's always been a team thing. Like everything, even City Folk, like it's the support of so many people over so many years that gets somebody there. Like, it's definitely not me just putting up my hand and saying, book me for City Folk. It's years in the making, and it's from those people who are leaving their houses and booking living room shows and giving to the Indiegogo campaign to help finance my albums that I release independently, as we talked about. And it's the people who are just constantly encouraging and saying, when's the next project? How can we help you with things? It goes a long way. If you're just one person thinking that you don't know how you're going to make a difference and you'd like these bigger acts to come to Ottawa, leave your house once a year. and come to a show. Because apparently there's 1 million people that live here. And if a
You
million
never see
people
them.
go to those shows, we'd be a very different city, I think.
What are some good venues in Ottawa? I mean, I know there's people outside of here who listen. So if you're ever coming to Ottawa, here's like a pro tip. But like, what are some like really good venues in Ottawa?
This is my favorite thing to plug. One, Live on Elgin. I'm saying that because I'm super biased and I love it. But I was playing there last night.
That's where the podcast festival was too.
So great. It's so good. The people that they hire in there are also musicians and actors, all working the jobs there. It's great. Live on Elgin's awesome. Irene's, if you're looking for like a bluesy kind of experience, Irene's is great. Queen Street Fair just opened. I'm saying just, it opened a little bit of time ago, but there's a lot of really great shows that go on at Queen Street Fair downtown. What other music venues? Prest is a place if you're looking for like a 15-seater show and you want it to be super intimate and acoustic. Prest is really good. You put me on the spot, and I'm thinking
okay.
of like 75 venues that I'd probably like to say something about. And I'm just mentioning a lot of places that are downtown. The Rainbow is fun.
Yeah.
The
I've
Rainbow is
been
good.
So needless to say, there's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I find myself doing a lot of corporate stuff and not doing as many music venue things.
Oh, really?
So I'm trying to remember all of the really, really good places. Oh, Bar Robo is really nice too. That's in Chinatown.
Which is the funniest thing is I've lived here pretty much my whole life, and I'm pretty active outside, and I've never heard of most of those.
Oh no, they're
Yeah.
wonderful. You're gonna come to a show with me sometime, Ryan.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I definitely do. That's always been one thing I've it's always on the agenda. And now that I'm figuring out life a little bit more, putting it, I can be one of those 1 million people for
One in
sure.
a million people. Just one.
But I've seen you perform a bunch of times, and you're great. So
Thank you.
you're
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
I don't know if you remember that time we were at that birthday event of our friend, alum of the podcast, Dylan Black, but I was front row singing every single song with you. So that was a long time ago. That's one of my favorite. That's a good memory.
What was that? Was that 4 years ago?
Must have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at Lower Town.
Yep. Wow,
Yeah.
that was 5 years ago. Time flies when you're making podcasts.
Holy moly. I'm only a year into this. So there's just kind of like 2 years there. That was kind of like a blur.
Yep. I think we can all say that about
Yeah.
2 years of our lives
Seriously.
for sure.
Who are some of the artists like you listen to that you, I don't want to say get inspiration from, but like what's on your playlist? What's going on?
So I super like a lot of local bands, and because I'm at so many
Good
shows,
for you.
I end up hearing
Yeah.
a lot of them. And I book them all for my art night as well, just because they're so much fun. Tina Wallace is hilarious, and she just kind of does these comedic interludes in between songs. Jumpin' Joel Flash and the Magic Machine for Name Alone.
I love these names.
It's so dramatic. His stage show is so incredible. We played once at the Gladstone Theater on the set of Little Shop of Horrors, and the man-eating flower danced while we were playing music. It was very beautiful. I've got a whole list of weird gigs that I could also recite. Other bands that are great, the Peptides. The Peptides
I've seen them
are
a few times.
also very good. Oh my gosh, and I'm blanking as well. There's so many people I could mention. On the French side, if you like French music, Christine Saint-Pierre is really, really good, really talented, an excellent storyteller in both languages. And who else do I want to mention? There's like 300 super talented acts in Ottawa.
The whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, it's a whole pod. Like I could just spend an hour naming everybody who's really incredible. But I'd say that my biggest influence right now that I'm kind of listening to on repeat is a band from Montreal called Half Moon Run. I just think that the rhythms and the melodies and the harmonies are so good, and watching them live, each band member plays like 4 instruments, and they're constantly switching, and all 4 are singing simultaneously, and it's so much fun to watch.
Oh, wow.
And it's so good.
What kind of like genre, if it fits one?
It's much more the kind of indie rock. We got a lot of play on like alternative stations in town.
Oh,
So I would take a look at them if you're into that.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
Half Moon Run. They played a Dragon Boat Festival this year. I got to see them live. I've been waiting for so long to see them live. It was great.
Do you get to meet them too? Like, do you get like a little press on a musician too? Like, go backstage?
When you're playing the big festivals, yeah. Otherwise, I can't usually just walk up and say, I play guitar, I swear. Let me backstage.
Be like that wrestler and being fake, the Lacey Evans thing, where you're just like, don't you know who I am? I'm a musician.
Okay, I should try that next time.
Well, it's like, are you working on another album coming up here? Is that in the works? Are you working on new material? Like, one of the fun things I love, and I always get into this problem where I ask so many questions in one, but then I just get excited. Like, do you ever go out and you're like, test out a song? So one of my favorite things about when I listen to comedians talk is they talk about working out material before you bring it to like the special or the big time. Like, is it the same thing like for you? Like, do you kind of like write a song? Go out and play it a couple times, get the reaction, see if you're happy with it. Like, is there like that test process, or like, do you kind of just like, you're just like done, and then you just send it out to the world? Now this is part of my repertoire.
I think there's only 2 songs that I wrote in 20 minutes because they just happened. And it's like, this needs to happen right now. Stop everything. But the other ones, like, I'm a pretty big perfectionist. So I spend a lot of time revising before I will even play it in front of people. But it always changes. Like, when it gets to a point that you've played it so often, and it depends too. Like, I've got different iterations in my head of each song. For how long a segment needs to be on different media channels, or if I've only got so much time left in a set, then I can edit the song as I'm going to change it to match whatever it is that I need. So they change over time. Like, as soon as you, even what I've got on the albums, as soon as you've played it that many times live, it definitely changes.
Just to spice things up a little bit, eh?
Yeah.
So you're working on some new stuff right now?
Yeah, I've done some traveling in the last few years. Which,
That's right, you were in Portugal.
Yeah, which is so
That's
nice.
dope.
So much sun. Can you tell that I'm extremely tanned right now? Very pale.
The lighting's good in here.
It's the fluorescence. Yeah, no, so I did some shows in Germany, and I did some shows in Portugal, and in between, in the last couple of years, just kind of visiting other countries and seeing the way other people make art and other people live, and just kind of falling in love over and over again with all these different places, which is kind of the beauty of traveling. And I feel so blessed to have been able to go to any of these places and perform in some of them. But the next album is kind of, again, why I think it's so much of a struggle for me to understand that people are pulling arts funding and pulling comms funding, because the only thing we need in life as humans is the ability to communicate with other humans. And so going into these other cities and kind of picking up little languages along the way, because I didn't want to be that English-speaking person that walks in and is like, I demand that all of you speak English. And I really, really love other languages. And then when I was in high school, they trained us to sing in many different languages, though we'd get the translation. I didn't necessarily understand always what was going on. But now I've picked up a little bit of French, I've picked up a little bit of Portuguese, and I've met a couple of people in other countries that make art. So the next album that I'm working on is going to be multilingual, and it's going to kind of be like a love letter to the world. But it's going to take some time.
Yeah,
It's going to take some time.
One of the most... it was a year or 2 years ago, I did it in Opera Singer, and she sung in all those different languages, and she would do take like translator things on her phone. She's like trying to like understand it because she's trying to learn a song.
Yep.
And so it was like the way I'm musically inclined, but the way like how that worked and how your brain must work to pick out a language you're not familiar with and then put it into not only music and a song, but your song. So you're still speaking from your voice. Like that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating because like I still say bonjour. Like I can't even speak French.
But there's something like German that I've met this very, very lovely German artist that I'm hoping that I can collaborate certain parts because I also don't want to do a disservice to the language. But other languages that I just feel comfortable. It's also just making these things a little more accessible for everybody. So if I'm in Portugal and I've got this chorus that's in Portuguese, but it's also English in the verse, it's just kind of hopefully breaking down barriers between people and breaking down some of those language barriers. That's the hope for the project,
Right.
but it's going to be a doozy.
That's fun. So
Lofty
we can
goals.
expect that in the next like a couple months.
Oh yeah, it's going to be released in 2 days. No.
Come on. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Good for you for trying to change the world and put out great content.
Thank you. That's the goal.
It's kind of sad that, you know, a lot of artists in Europe, and if they want to make it big, they have to put out English music.
Yeah.
You know, like you're getting big people now from Sweden and Germany and France, but they all have to sing in English and not their native tongue in order. I mean, you can be big in your country, but you want to. It's English.
Yeah.
So you kind of give away some of your culture and what makes you who you are, just to put it out there and
just to make it pop,
make money.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like it's a kind of love letter from Canada too. It's just kind of this. I will meet you halfway. Like I'm going to learn this much so that we can communicate. It's like I just felt so uncomfortable with the idea of touring in these other countries where the native language was different, and then I would just walk up and say, "Hey guys, how's it going tonight?" Like the least I can do is say hello in your language and thank you in your language. But I think the next step for me to feel much more comfortable would be to sing in their language.
What was that like performing in another country for the first time? Like that must have been
terrifying.
Yeah, you're kind of like. I don't know if you've like done like other cities in Canada and stuff, but you know, primarily Ottawa, and now all of a sudden you're on the other side of the ocean, like trying to.
Yep. Well, I toured Ontario and the East Coast a few times.
Okay.
So the touring thing wasn't new, which was, I think, helped because I was still terrified that first show. Because my first show actually out of the country was in Berlin, in Germany. And the whole room was packed, which was very nice, but I had no idea what was about to happen. I had no idea who could speak English, if I was to speak in between songs, or if I was to sing in English, how that would go. But most people speak English wherever you're going in the world. So everybody was so kind and so helpful and helped me book a couple of extra shows while I was there too. And the same in Portugal. And I was actually quite surprised because I played in Lisbon and there were almost no Portuguese people in the entire venue because it's become such a tourist destination that the only Portuguese person was the owner. Even the bartender was German. And everybody was from like Hong Kong and England, and we had somebody from Denmark, and there's somebody from Australia. Like it was very cool because it's just people from around the world. We had 2 people from India, and in some cases, people were like, "Yeah, we're about to get on a plane, but we just heard music in the street, and so we decided to come on by."
That's awesome. But now you know they can take your music back with them to.
Yeah,
their respective countries. And
so that's the hope. And it was nice because everybody spoke English at that show. So I didn't feel as much like I was just forcing my Englishness on everybody. Because next time it will be a different story, I hope.
Where can people find your music? Like, so I know you have some albums, but like, where can they get them? Are you on all the streaming platforms and everything?
On all the streaming platforms. So if you're on Spotify listening to this podcast right now, I'm also on Spotify, and you're on Apple Music.
Yep.
I'm also on Apple Music, Google Music, all those things. But my website is danielleallard.com.
Super
it's just
easy.
My name. And you can find everything there.
Way
so
to get the
everything
domain
is
for that too, eh? You don't have to do like underscore.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Fortunately, I did have to add a J in my name on social media platforms because the other Danielle Allard already took my username.
Oh my god, and they probably don't even tweet anymore. It's been like 10 years.
Yeah, I'm not that invested though. I'm not going to get them to sell it to me.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
I like to say keep hammering. That's my new catchphrase. I like to tell, but
it's a good one.
I mean, it's amazing to see someone who not only, you know, works hard and is a great person, but just like continue that progression upwards.
You're gonna make me cry, Ryan.
I'm sorry. It's all emotional, but no, like continued success. And I, like I said, off mic, that, you know, I have been following along like with albums and stuff like that. So I look forward to seeing and hearing more.
And I look forward to seeing and hearing more podcasts. But this was nice to catch up.
It was.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.